everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome to my Astro community. In today's video, we're going to be talking about people's first impression of you when they first meet you based on your zodiac sign. Now, this video will be most accurate probably for your rising sign, but you can watch your sun and moon sign as well. Okay, so let's talk about Aries first impressions on people. So with Aries, how people perceive you upon first impression is that you are very direct. And I feel like with Aries, it's so unique. It's almost like your energy is very direct. It's like your energy is very straightforward. Your energy is definitely felt when people meet you. It's not like an energy that's like unnoticeable, if that makes sense. I feel like your energy is like, wow, they're here, they're confident, they're powerful. Some people might perceive you as arrogant, maybe confident. It just depends on your energy, but usually you're either on one side of that spectrum. And also Aries, people might perceive you as loud. Again, I feel like with Aries energy, it is very loud, like metaphorically, but literally you might have a very loud voice. And really the way you project yourself is very direct, loud, boisterous. It is very confident too, sometimes a little arrogant. And overall, people might perceive you too with this very childish or lively energy. Something about Aries energy isn't super calm. It's not super like settled down, especially like Aries rising, Aries moon, more so than sun. I feel like your energy is almost on 10 a lot of the time, and people pick up on that a lot. And also too, Aries are really funny. I don't know if that counts for like first impression, but I feel like that's one of the first things people notice about Aries once they have a first like conversation with them, is that they're naturally just very funny, because I feel like they have that I don't care attitude, and so I feel like when they have that attitude, people just find it really funny. So yeah, overall, Aries sun, moon, or rising, people might perceive you as confident, arrogant, direct, a little childish, lively, maybe even restless, and overall you have this very bold, very dignified energy about you. Okay, so let's talk about Taurus first impressions and how people first perceive you. Right away with Taurus, you have a very calm, very gentle energy. And I feel like the first impression of Taurus is that they are very unbothered. I feel like when people first meet Taurus, they have this very comforting energy. It's almost like you want to be around them even more, because they just have this gentle, very calm vibe that comforts people, even if you just met them and you're a stranger. And some Taurus might be a bit quiet or reserved. Now, I will say that Taurus, I wouldn't say they're shy necessarily. I feel like they're definitely more pulled back at first. They're not like all up in your face when you first meet them. I feel like they're a little bit more observant, a little bit more reserved in the first impression. And then later they come out their shell a little bit more, but at first I feel like they're just more leveled. They're more calm, like I said, gentle. They're not doing the most upon first impression. And overall, the first impression of you guys is like a peaceful vibe, especially Taurus moons. People just feel at home around you. And then another thing I will add about Taurus first impressions is that people notice your voice right away. Usually you have a very distinct voice, a voice that might be a little bit raspy, maybe a voice that's a little bit deeper than normal, a voice that's very smooth. Something about your voice is just very attractive to people, and people just remember it, even meeting you for the first time. I really remember their voice for some reason. And I feel like if you didn't know a person was a Taurus when you first meet them, and then you hear their voice and it sounds specifically like really smooth, really deep, really raspy, something about their voice is really specific, that's how you know they're a Taurus, is because they have a very noticeable voice. And a lot of times they might even have a comforting voice, or a voice that kind of matches their energy. Like I said, they're very gentle, very comforting, so they might have that same kind of maybe smooth, deep, raspy sort of voice. So yeah, overall, Taurus first impressions, I feel like you're definitely perceived as someone who is very gentle and calm at first, maybe a little bit reserved, maybe even a little bit quiet. I wouldn't say shy, but reserved definitely. And overall, people might perceive you as someone who is very peaceful, and they might really remember your voice, depending on how it sounds. Okay, so let's talk about Gemini first impressions and how people first perceive you. So with Gemini, I feel like people perceive you right away as someone with very childish energy. I feel like when it comes to meeting people, it's so easy to guess Geminis because their energy is kind of restless. It's not very focused, very grounded energy a lot of the times. It's energy that is very fast-paced, and I feel like you can sense that in the way they talk to you. It's like they're talking really fast, they're kind of distracted. Their energy isn't very centered a lot of the times. I feel like it's very distracted, very restless energy. And because of that, it can come off as a bit childish. And then also too, with this like childish theme, I feel like the first impression of you is very animated. People think you're very animated, like I said, with the way you speak, what you talk about. It's not like you're toning it down for anyone. I feel like you're just very chatty naturally. And with your chattiness, there's this energy of being very animated with people. And then also people might perceive you as somebody who is very witty, someone that is very clever. As I mentioned, I feel like when you first meet Geminis, they might be talking at like a mile a minute. And so right away people are like, wow, they're really smart, they're really clever, witty. Something about them just seems very intelligent. And also I feel like people's perception of you and how they first perceive you might be a little bit annoying. Like I said, your energy can be a little bit like restless or a little bit animated, and some people are just like not with that at all. Some people are very calm and like not about the chattiness that Gemini do bring. So some people might perceive it as annoying, but other people might perceive it as kind of exciting and really engaging and very endearing too. So overall with Gemini, I feel like the way people first perceive you is that they perceive you as someone who is very witty, someone who's restless, animated, has this almost childlike energy about them, very distracted energy as well. And in terms of personality traits, people might think you're very charming, clever, witty, or intelligent too. Okay, so let's talk about first impressions for Cancers and how people first perceive you. So right away with Cancers, I feel like people first perceive them as shy. Obviously, Cancers right away when you first meet them, they're not really out of their shell yet. So when people meet you, I think they think you're a bit shy. A lot of Cancers too, especially risings, might struggle with RBF or resting B-faced. So people might think you're mean right away. So right away, people might think you're shy, reserved, or introverted, or they might just think you're kind of mean or kind of standoffish too. So I feel like those are the main two ways like first impressions with Cancers will go. When it comes to the shy vibe, I feel like some people might find you as very nurturing right away when you have that first conversation. People might find you a little bit welcoming or comforting even. And people might perceive you as a very sweet person. I think once they get past that kind of like defensive, cautious energy Cancer projects at first, I think people find you very welcoming, as I said, and they really find you as like a sweet person, someone who does have a good heart. And a lot of times with this shyness, I feel like it is a little bit introverted. Like you're not the person who might make the first move when it comes to speaking to new people. Cancers are the main ones who have like social anxiety. So like I said, I think how you're perceived is a little bit different than how you think you are perceived. In that people might find you a bit standoffish at first and not really see your sweet nature. But I feel like when they first have that conversation with you, I feel like people are like, oh, okay, they are very sweet-hearted, but they would never guess that from afar because you do seem a little bit closed off, standoffish, or have RBF, right? So yeah, overall for Cancer, you might seem a little bit cautious to people. You might seem shy, introverted. You might even seem a little bit mean to some people or unapproachable even. But I do think when it comes to like first conversation or first like meeting someone, I do think people think you are warm-hearted, you are kind, but it takes a minute to get there because they see your kind of hardened shell at first. Okay, so let's talk about first impressions of Leo and how people first perceive you. So right away, first impressions with Leo, I think people perceive you as someone who is extra. And really specifically, I feel like with Leos, there's something about them that is exaggerated. Even if it's like the shyest Leo, the most introverted Leo, something about them is very noticeable to other people. Now, we all know Leos can be known for their hair, so maybe that's an exaggerated part of you. Maybe your style is exaggerated. Maybe your smile is exaggerated. Even your energy. Something about Leos is usually exaggerated, even if they are the quietest person in the room. And so I think people's first impression of you is that you are very magnetic in that sense. It's almost like, I feel like with Leo energy, something about them, it's like you want to be around them. They have this sense of vitality that kind of draws other people to them naturally. And because they have that exaggerated trait about them, it's almost like people want to pay attention to that for some reason. And I feel like Leos typically feed off of that, especially in their first impression with people. So it makes them someone who can seem very expressive, almost like Gemini in a sense, like very animated, almost dramatic too. And overall, there's this very vibrant energy with Leos. Even if they aren't have something physical about them that is exaggerated, like I said, they have this vibrant, very noticeable magnetic energy about them. And then of course people perceive them as proud or confident. I will say the other side of the spectrum for Leos is like People might see you as a bit arrogant, maybe a little bit stuck up too. I think people might perceive you too as a little bit self-centered at first, or somebody who is kind of self-obsessed. And sometimes with Leo, I feel like they get two major reactions with people. I feel like the first reaction is, like I said, someone who is very magnetic, people want to talk to you, you're very vibrant, whatever. But then the second reaction is like, people are like, wow, they're doing too much. I feel like Leos definitely specifically experience those two reactions from people in their first impression with them. So it just depends on the person that is perceiving you, I guess. But overall, like I said, there is this kind of undeniable magnetic energy about them. And then also with the first impression, they are perceived as very kind. I do think people see Leos in a very positive light when they first meet them. It's like, wow, this person does seem kind-hearted. They seem warm, they seem vibrant. Like, as I talk about this, I just think about the sun and how Leos are ruled by the sun, and they have that very warm energy about them, that very kind, welcoming energy about them when you first meet them. And they do have that playful energy when you first meet them as well. So yeah, overall with Leos, when people first perceive you, they see you as someone who is very confident, proud, vibrant, magnetic, expressive. As I said, there's something about you that is very noticeable, and it draws people to you because of that. And people might even see you as a little bit dramatic, or maybe even like that person that does too much. People might perceive you as someone who is the center of attention as well. Okay, so let's talk about Virgo first impressions and how people first perceive you. So with Virgo, right away, people might perceive you as someone who is very pensive. And it's funny, now that I think about it, Virgos are such sweethearts once you get to know them. But I feel like when you first meet them, they are very kind of closed off. They project this image that is very cold, very calculated. And they also have this first impression where it's like, they seem very polished, they seem very perfect almost. I think Virgos are the first ones to get like that Miss Perfect, Mr. Perfect kind of image, because that's what they kind of project. And because of that, I feel like they seem very cold, very calculated at first. Mind you, Virgo is a very observant sign. So I think with Virgos, they seem very shy because they are observing people first. Virgos, I feel like, aren't necessarily the first ones to make the first move. So because of that, they are perceived as someone who is shy, someone who seems like they're holding back a bit, someone that is very kind of closed off at first. However, I do feel like upon the first conversation or interaction with the Virgo, you can like notice right away, they seem very down to earth. Like with Virgos, I feel like a lot of them, especially girls, might have like RBF, or might seem kind of like standoffish or stuck up even. But like when you first talk to them, it's like, oh wow, they are really relatable, or they are really down to earth, and they don't seem as like pretentious or stuck up as they seem at first. And I definitely feel like Virgos get that label a lot, especially like maybe Virgo risings, Virgo moons, even Virgo suns, of course. They get that like stuck up, pretentious reputation or perception of themselves. But it's not until you really talk to them for the first time that you're like, oh wow, that's like, they're not as stuck up as they seem, or pretentious as they seem, or as closed off or cold as they seem. So yeah, overall with Virgos, upon first impressions, people perceive you as someone who is very maybe shy, introverted, cold, or calculated, maybe someone who can be stuck up or seem pretentious. And people also perceive you as someone that is very polished, very put together type of person. And then of course, once they have that first conversation with you, I feel like they do see how down to earth you really are. Okay, so let's talk about Libra first impressions and how people first perceive them. So right away with Libras, people first perceive you as someone that is very friendly, someone that is very relatable. I feel like Libras definitely pride themselves on having great first impressions with people. I feel like Libras care a lot about their rapport with people and how they're perceived, and Libras care a lot about their reputation. And because of that, I feel like they do make sure to leave a good impression on people. So I feel like out of all the signs, Libra is the one that is most conscious of how they are perceived to people. And because of that, they make sure they leave a good first impression. So I will say that their first impression, or how people perceive them right away, is very favorable. It is very positive. And even more specifically, people see you as someone who's friendly, someone who's likable, someone who is relatable. You're somebody people just want to talk to. I feel like you're someone who is also very approachable as well. Depending on the Libra and depending on the person that is perceiving you, I think some people might perceive them as stuck up. I will say Libras have that kind of bougie vibe depending on the Libra, but they kind of have that vibe sometimes of being stuck up if you haven't really talked to them. But I feel like that doesn't really last. I feel like people don't think Libras are stuck up, but I think people can confuse you for being stuck up until they talk to you and then they see, okay, they're really likable, they're very relatable, they're just easy to talk to and approachable. And of course, people perceive you as someone who is very charming, someone who is like that social butterfly. I think charming is like the #1 on this list. So yeah, overall for Libra, you are very charming upon first impression. You are very likable, relatable. On another note, some people might perceive you as bougie or stuck up, but like I said, I don't feel like that lasts very long. And I do think people perceive you as someone who is relatable and approachable. Okay, so let's talk about Scorpio first impressions and how people perceive them. Okay, with Scorpio, right away, they are the kings and queens of RBF. So with Scorpio, I think because since you're known for like that very intimidating stare you have, or kind of the way your face is set up, it is kind of intimidating and kind of standoffish to some people. People might not perceive you in the best way at first. I feel like people perceive you as someone who is very intimidating at first. And also, I will say another thing about Scorpios that is very noticeable upon first impression is that they do have a very distinct, powerful presence. It's almost like when a Scorpio enters a room, you know it. Not that you know that they're a Scorpio, but you just know that the person entering the room is entering the room, if that makes sense. They have this really interesting presence about them that is very quiet but noticeable at the same time. It's almost sort of like a cat. Like if you think about a cat is very quiet when it comes into a room, but it's like you notice the cat right away. And I just feel like their energy alone, without even talking to them, is very memorable. It is very powerful. And like I said, it is very intimidating to people. Also, I will say people's first impression of you is that you can be very intense, or like I said, very powerful seeming, I guess. And I also think you have this very authoritative presence about you as well. And especially in that like first conversation with people, like the first conversation you have when you first meet them, you do have this very intense way of projecting yourself. And I think people really pick up on that. So I feel like people perceive you as someone that is very intense, very passionate, and very powerful at the same time. And I also will add they are very magnetic and also very seductive too. Like something about them just kind of pulls you in. Like I said, they can be the quietest person in the room, but their energy really speaks the loudest. So yeah, overall, I feel like the traits people pick up on Scorpios upon first impression is that they are intimidating, authoritative, powerful, distinct, what's the other one I said? Passionate and intense. Okay, so let's talk about Sagittarius first impressions and how people first perceive them. So right away, Sagittarius. I feel like people like notice you right away. Like if you're ever in a new group of people or in a crowd, I feel like Sagittarius is usually like the loudest one. And typically I feel like how people perceive you at first is like either you're loud, a little bit obnoxious maybe, your laughter is loud. Something about you, especially like your energy, is very noticeable. It's almost like you attract attention to you very effortlessly. And like I said, I feel like the perception of you can go one of two ways. I feel like one way is like, oh my gosh, they're so obnoxious, like be quiet. But then the other way, or the other perception, is that, oh my gosh, they're the life of the party. And overall, that's how I would characterize Sagittarius energy upon first impression. It's like the life of the party energy. They're always making jokes, always making laughter. They're socializing. They're kind of, like I said, they're attracting attention to them very effortlessly. And I do feel like they have this very proud energy, this very kind of almost arrogant energy, depending on the Sagittarius, but I feel like they have this energy about them that is very proud, very regal. And I think that's what people pick up on right away. I think they pick up on the fact that you are very benevolent, very proud. They pick up on the fact that you do seem very friendly and welcoming as well. And definitely I feel like people pick up on your humor and your funniness as well. I feel like your funniness is also a little bit linked to the charm you have. I feel like you're very charming too. And people do find you very amusing at first. And also Sagittarius are very optimistic people, and I think that people pick up on that right away. People are like, wow, they seem so happy, they seem so joyous, they seem so boisterous. Something about your energy is just almost infectious. It's like you might have a big smile or a big laugh, or you make people laugh, or there's this energy of happiness that does surround you. Overall, you do project this very happy, very jovial, very optimistic, very just joyous energy, and I think you have this very happy aura around you, and I think that's why you attract so many people towards you, is because who doesn't want to be around someone who's so happy? So yeah, overall for Sagittarius, the traits I would use to describe your first impressions on people is that you are very happy, jovial, joyous, optimistic, you're very boisterous, loud, funny. You also might be very proud and just very noticeable and just naturally the center of attention. Okay, so let's talk about Capricorn first impressions and how people first perceive them. So Capricorns. Of course, I feel like they definitely have that impression of RBF. And I mentioned this for Scorpios as well. I feel like Scorpios and Capricorns struggle with that the most, is resting B face. And even more so with Capricorns, I definitely feel like they have kind of a cold energy. Right away, it doesn't seem very welcoming. And it has to do with their face a little bit, I guess, because they do seem very serious, very stoic, and a little bit emotionless. Impression of you, it's kind of like hard to read you. It's kind of hard to perceive whether or not you even like them, because I think Capricorn's energy can seem very pretentious, a little bit stuck up, a little bit judgmental too. And because you have that kind of cold vibe and kind of like serious face, people are like, are they approachable? Are they friendly? Are they not? Like Capricorn is definitely like that sign. You have to peel the layers back a bit and really get to know them and then find out that they are a very warm, caring person. But upon first impressions, you do seem a little bit cold and unapproachable. And I think something that is so distinct about them is that they do seem very serious, very authoritative. I feel like with Capricorns, they always seem like an old man. Even if they are a young person or a little kid, they just seem so mature that it just almost seems a little bit intimidating. Like the word authoritative really comes to mind, and I feel like people really pick up on that at first. It's like, oh my gosh, they seem like they're judging me, or they seem so serious or so mature. And overall it contributes to this like impression of being unapproachable or not really friendly or cold to people. And I will say also that people perceive you as someone that is very respectable. Right away, I feel like people respect Capricorns very much. Even if they don't even know them, they don't know their name, they never talk to them, just by looking at a Capricorn from a distance, I feel like it's like, wow, I respect them. And it's because, like I said, you have this very authoritative energy. You have this very polished look about you too. You have this very mature energy, stoic, serious energy, so people just respect that right away, because subconsciously we see them as kind of like authority figures because that's how they act. And then also too, I think I mentioned this in my physical appearance video, but of course, I feel like people might perceive you as someone that is older than they are. I did mention that Capricorns do age backwards, so when you're young, I feel like people think you're like old, or think you're in an authority position, or they think you're like a big sister, or I don't know, they just see you in this very mature light. Even if you are very young, even if you are like a teenager, people see you as this almost older person. But then when you do age more, like when you're like maybe 30 or a little bit, maybe even like later 20s, I feel like people perceive you as someone that is younger. So I feel like it does flip for Capricorns, but specifically I think with the people watching this, they might experience the perception of being seen as very mature, very stoic, and maybe even older than they actually are. So yeah, overall for Capricorns, people do perceive you as someone that is a bit cold, unapproachable, emotionless, and also a little bit distant and detached as well. They might see you as like an authority figure, someone who's mature, very serious, and very stoic too. And then of course we can't forget the RBF that Capricorns can be known for. Okay, so let's talk about Aquarius first impressions and how people first perceive you. So right away with Aquarius, I feel like people perceive you as someone who is a little bit cold and even a little bit rude. Like I feel like the energy when you first meet an Aquarius is that they're very unconcerned, very distant, very kind of unbothered with whatever you're saying to them. Like they might not be the first person to be very warm and engaging to you. I feel like they're that person that's kind of like whatever. Like I feel like, I don't know, I feel like they have this rude vibe they give off upon first impression. And right away, I feel like they don't seem that friendly. And then also with first impressions, of course, Aquarius are known for being like unique or different. And I think people pick up on that right away. They might sense an energy about you that is very different from other people, that isn't very, you know, average Joe type of energy. And literally physically, there might be something about you that is very unique. I think I sense that especially with like Aquarius style, like the way they dress, or their hair, or something about their face, or how they talk. Something about them is very not of the norm, and people definitely pick up on that right away. I feel like people might also perceive them as awkward at first, like a little bit socially awkward. And very observant too. I think I said that earlier, where it's like they're not the first to engage in conversation right away. I feel like they're just gonna kind of stand back, watch people, see how they act at first. And because of that, they do project this image, or they are perceived as someone who is very distant at first. So yeah, overall for Aquarius, I do think people perceive you, upon first impressions, they perceive you as someone who is very cold, distant, a little bit rude, maybe a little bit standoffish, or socially awkward. Okay, so let's talk about first impressions for Pisces and how people first perceive them. So right away, I feel like Pisces can be perceived as shy. I think Pisces, when you first meet them, have this very innocent vibe about them. They have this kind of innocence that is a little bit childlike and just very non-threatening. I feel like with Pisces, people just feel like they can be themselves around them. There's no like weird barrier or weird like tension when you first meet a Pisces. I feel like they are very welcoming. They're very, like I said, they're so innocent seeming and very soft and shy that nothing about them is threatening. So you can just kind of share what you want with them because they don't seem too guarded. Also, Pisces can seem a little bit detached, but kind of detached in like a dreamy sort of way. Like they might seem like they're not really mentally there with you in that conversation. They might be kind of like drifting off or a little bit distracted. Like I feel like with Pisces, it's like you can have the first conversation with them and it feels like they're listening, but not really. They have this kind of dreamy, kind of detached way of seeming where it's like, are you really reaching them? Like, are you really talking to them? Or are they just like, is their head in the clouds? But I do think people perceive you as someone who is very kind. And because of that, I think some people might perceive you as someone who is a little bit ditzy or naive. And then also, I will add, people might perceive you as someone who is very kind, compassionate. Like I said, there's this very kind of comforting energy about you, this like non-threatening energy about you. I feel like Pisces are the first ones to have people just come up to them and like tell them their problems a lot of the time because people feel so open to them. But yeah, overall, I feel like the first impression with Pisces is that they do seem very shy, very innocent, maybe a little bit withdrawn as well, not too outgoing at first, and they can seem kind of mentally detached as well, and not really present when you're talking to them. And of course, they seem very kind and sweet as well. So yeah, give this video a thumbs up and I'll see you guys in my next video.